First of all, I have a question to the other three panelists, except Ms. Paterka. What's your reaction? What's your gut reaction to Ms. Paterka's presentation? I will start with Robert. Thank you very much. I didn't ask a question just now because I knew that we were going to discuss these topics now. So thank you so much for this exciting keynote. I think what's important to me is to underscore, and I think that became very clear during the presentation of Ms. Paterka, that we know a lot about how artificial intelligence and other digital technologies are going to influence our work, or we can make estimates in any case. Essentially, what has become clear is that the future is open, and I think it's a very encouraging signal that the Federal Ministry for Labour and Social Affairs understands that we're walking towards a future in which these technologies and the interaction and the way people actually design it, that this will entail changes, but that we need to be open to it. Very much so, because we need to be conscious of the fact that there are different paths in the development and the application of these technologies. And I think that is important because this puts us in a position where we need to act. We can always be reactive. We can see that there's a technology and this is happening with it. But basically, we are the ones designing technologies. We're the ones who make decisions at different points with different degrees of responsibility as to how those technologies will be designed. And I think that's a major point that I would love to talk about today, is how do we get to a point where we can tap the potentials and make use of these technologies? Because what we're seeing is that AI in companies is already being employed, but a lot of the time where they focus on process optimizations, business models are not as much of a focus, and something else that is not as much of a focus are the human interactors, those who interact with AIs. How can we support them? And if you actually have a look around at this fairground, this is something that we're not yet focusing on. And I think it is important that we understand that we need to design this development. Thank you very much, Robert. Ms. Schlinkert, please. We'll get to you in a minute, Frank. I agree with what was just said. We're employing AI or machine learning to understand AI as a tool rather than a threat. People are designing it, and we use it in a way that you can cooperate. There are some very clear limits, however. I think right now we're at the very starting point of what is developing at the moment, and we're going to see many different versions of AI. And depending on each use case, it kind of makes you wonder, is this helping me to get better at what I'm doing? So we're going to see different types of applications. But I'm very much looking forward to the journey because many things are only just getting started. Frank Lennings, there you go. I had many things that I was familiar with already, especially when it comes to participation. That is something that's quite important to us. We have a project that is actually promoted by your institution, where we try to put project leaders, we try to support them to use AI in the non-technical side in the companies making this successful, and in order for it to be successful, it needs to be accepted. So we have integrated a module where the topic of acceptance is actually considered in the training of those AI mentors, and with the instruments or those contents, transparency and participation in the design of those technologies. So I thought, this was easy for me to understand. So the meaning of participation, I can only highlight it, and I'm glad that I heard something on the project of AI economics, which I wasn't aware of, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing about its results. Thank you so much. What we're going to do now is I'm going to ask you about your takes individually, which you have provided to us beforehand, and then we'll have the opportunity to discuss among the panelists and also with the audience. So what are your theses? I'm going to start with Frank Lennings. I have already introduced him to you. Frank Lennings, Head of Corporate Excellence at IFAA, the Institute for Applied Work Science. He mentioned a theory of his, or a thesis, if you will. We will see more competencies and more qualifications are going to be needed for the use of AI. And also the requirements for employees are going to increase. In most cases, no further qualifications are required, and assistance systems will actually reduce the need, will actually reduce the complexity of work tasks. So I think this is a very controversial take in this context. So I would like to give you the opportunity to say something about this and to provide some context, and then I will have a question to you about this. To provide you some context, at IFAA we conducted a project on the examination of the effects of digitalization. Digitalization, not necessarily AI, but usually AI is still a part of the future, and we investigated 30 use cases. We examined them, actually implemented digitalization use cases in the form of interviews. So what has actually changed for employees with regard to the work tasks, their activities, and the requirements? And one result was that usually employees for the work with digital assistance systems do not require any further formal qualifications. So the tasks and the activities carried out, generally speaking, as to scope and requirements have not changed, whereas certain individual tasks, they have been transformed. We have better information, so the requirements were actually lowered. However, there is no erosion of expert knowledge, which means that expert knowledge is still required for all of those solutions, and that is still the base for those solutions which have been provided in a better form now in order to be able to work for them, to handle them, in order to contextualize them. And as you said in the beginning, we also determined that the effects on the work and the individual tasks are not technology related, but rather related to the organization and the environment, depending on how the system is set up. And we found that in many cases, employees were already involved in the design of the organization. So you could imagine that somebody who's already involved can quickly and fairly easily work with it, fulfilling those requirements, which was not always the case, because in certain cases the employees were not involved from the beginning, but after that it became necessary in order to optimize the systems and capacitate them to work. So you already answered my question. I was going to ask you what it depends on. This is an advertisement. You can actually download our study online if you want to get the bigger picture. Well, whenever things are free, whenever things are open to the public, then I'm always for commercials. We have published a whole range of books which are all free and openly accessible on our website, iat-berlin.de. Feel free to download them. I saw that we have some guests, some members of the audience with headphones. We have some simultaneous interpretation. So please, just to the panelists, please make sure to not interrupt one another, making life easier for the interpreters, actually. This is what I was told from the panel discussion yesterday. Just as a quick reminder to you, I haven't seen this problem occurring today, however. Frank, you haven't answered my question. Well, you answered my question already, so I'm going to continue with the next person. And I'm going to ask Ms. Schlinker a question. You also provided us with a take of yours saying that the industrial future is data-driven, and in order to be successful, we need to protect our own IP and work together with others. So if you think about this, and if you think of typical small and medium enterprises of the metalworking industry, you might come up with the idea that this might be a bit of a challenge to take up these thoughts and ideologies, these ideas, and to implement them. That is exactly the experience that we've made. Data at the moment is very much correlated with power. That person disposing of data and insights at the end of the day, also holds the power. So along our value-creating chains, we need to find mechanisms so that everybody can participate in this future data-driven society that we're moving towards very clearly, and which is occurring in the industry. So we need to strike a balance between being able to work together, because cooperation, of course, you mentioned the example of an SME, but I'm not sure whether my microphone is on, but it seems to be working. We have tools, we have machines, we have the users, we have different types of materials, determining the quality of the production, and we need data on this, and these data need to be merged. So those smaller companies, a lot of the time, they do not have the specialists who can decide which data needs to be protected. So from the very beginning on, it is important to have a look at when you want to work together with others. How can the system be designed? And there are some very interesting technologies stemming from the mobile area. Data protection on smartphones, for instance, is at a very good point. So we have technology ensuring that the data stays on your phone and is not shared with others. So you have model parameters that get exchanged, thus creating a learning effect. So all of the data that should remain personal, because it is related to your person, it is not supposed to be shared with Google or anyone else. Well, they can be protected. And the same goes for the industry, or industrial applications, rather. Thank you very much. Robert, last but not least, you also provided us with a thesis of yours, or rather a theory or a take. AI systems make sure that the requirements to employees are increasing, especially because this does not pertain, well, they actually get unburdened, not just physically, but also intellectually. This can lead to an increasing polarization on the labor market when certain people are not able to face this increase in competencies, this further qualification that they need. I can give you an example for this. That always depends on what kind of technology design is underlying. We will continue to speak about this throughout the day. We have different future scenarios regarding the human-machine interaction together with the Federal Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs. So what we're seeing in certain application areas, employees, and that is something that Mr. Lennings explained to us, and this is a very good illustration by the use of the examples which you investigated, or examined rather. The domain knowledge is still important. It actually increases when you have to make a decision on the recommendation of an AI system. And we know this from, say, police work, that it's not easy. Because when the AI system makes a suggestion, we tend to doubt our own assumptions, or rather, not doubt them, according to a confirmation bias. And we tend to accept the recommendation when it confirms our own bias. So it becomes even more important because based on a decision that is suggested to me, I need to actually look into it. That is actually more difficult than making your own decision, being critical, if you catch my drift. Then it gets to driving when it comes to public transportation. We carried out a study in Saxony and the BMDV. Over the last legislation, they passed an act on autonomous driving, which was unique worldwide, and this enables the diffusion of autonomous driving technologies and describes what the technological oversight should be. So this is a new job in overall systems of autonomous driving, where people in public transportation, they don't just have a look at, okay, well, this switch is not working, so the train isn't running, but they actually look at whether the system is running well or whether there's a danger of accidents occurring, and they can show it. I mean, the legislator said, well, this is up to engineers. We spoke to public transportation companies, and they said, we do not have them. This is a job that does not yet exist. it is entirely excluded that we could obtain engineers for this because we couldn't pay them the money that they need. So we're developing new jobs, new activities, and the technological oversight once those jobs exist. People could take them on. Those could be people who in autonomous driving have gained experiences, that have for a long time been a part of the supervisory authority, have gathered their experiences there. They need to be qualified, they need to receive further training so they can actually gather those AI-based competencies. And we find these examples everywhere. On a micro level, there's always people whose qualifications and whose activities are actually relieved, are actually alleviated by the use of AI. But overall, if there's a growing number of tasks, a growing number of activities for which we need to train people, because at the moment we do not have those experts, irrespective of whether they're specialists or experts who have actually studied at university, but people who are not a perfect fit in terms of their skill set. Thank you very much.
You've already provided us with some answers to questions which have not yet been asked. Now, let me ask all of you, if I may. It's not all that easy. Requirements increase or decline. It depends on a large number of different factors, which have partly been mentioned. We have also carried out a study on LinkedIn. 71% of the interviewees are of the opinion that requirements will decline. 4% are of the opinion that requirements will decline. But, not everything, of course, has thus become visible because some parameters are a bit vague. Now, there are two different images that we have: AI replacing persons and AI enabling human beings. Now, my question to you is the following, starting off with Mrs. Peterka. What will this depend on? What is more likely to happen? And where can we still exert control? Where can we interfere? Well, thinking about this discussion, it's quite exciting, by the way, that we are talking about both extremes in the course of this discussion. I remember an activity that I was in before. When I started off my professional career, I lectured mathematics in a secondary school in the east of London. I lectured maths. I mean, this is maybe a bit distracting, but I'll come back to this issue in a minute. There were always two exams that had to be passed for secondary school in math. And then there was one exam where the pocket calculator was supposed to be used, and in the other exam you were not allowed to use it. In those exams you were not allowed to do it. You had to do maths by heart. You had to prove that you can do it all out of your own strength. And in the other exam you were to prove that you can use the machine, that you can do it quickly, that you know how to do the calculations. And, in these two exams, different competences were examined. And this has something to do with our discussion as well, because there are some things which can be achieved more rapidly. When I think about my own activity, very often we've got to write background. We've got to provide background information to the minister who wants to know what is a generative AI system. That's a lot of work. As Robert already explained, you've got to gather information, you've got to be able to write reports in an easy-to-read manner. But maybe AI can do the job as well quite easily. But what do I have to do? I have to double-check on that. Is everything correct? Are the facts correct? Is the content right? Is it written properly? Have all the aspects been taken into account? And for that, you have to have the competences, which are quite demanding, You have to be able to evaluate the content. You have to know about the domain. And here the question is, how can I reach that stage where I have the vast body of expertise? How can I do the research? How can I develop the knowledge about the domain? But on the other hand, I don't really have to do the job myself any longer. But I've got to be able to evaluate the content. This is why I gave you the example of the pocket calculator. I think we've got to do both at the same time. Also in the field of education, we need to teach both. How can we live without AI systems and do particular jobs and acquire the competences and skills that are required, and how can I do it with AI, and what are the different requirements? It's very interesting when you talk about education in general. We'll come back to that in a minute, but let me pass on the question to the next speaker. Frank Lennings has the floor. AI as a system which makes people superfluous or which supports people. What will it depend on? What will become a reality, and what can we do? I do hold the view that it depends very much on the context. There are particular tasks where this is not possible for AI to replace human beings, but there are scenarios where that is partly possible. In all the studies that we also had at EI for zero, the question is how many percentages of the human beings will be replaced. We've always learned that it's about parts of a job. It's never about entire professions that can be substituted. And I think it all depends on us. How much will we permit wherever it is possible? Because a lot is possible. So I think very much will it depend on us. And that is attributable to various different factors. If it's a company which has enough employees, are there enough jobs? There are a lot of different factors that have to be taken into account in this context. We won't end up with scenario A or scenario B only, but we will have different blends and mixes the world over. I think it also depends on us. You think you talk about corporations, managers who, based on their decision-making powers, take the decisions which lead to scenario A or else to scenario B. Yes, but this applies to each and every organization. Every organization has its own specificities and framework conditions which have to be taken into account. So you don't have to boil it down to industrial institutions only. No. Robert, what will happen? Scenario A or... Oh, sorry, Anna. Well, I'm very much thinking about industrial applications and machine learning. Where can it be used? And where do we confront particular issues? Here we talk about skilled workers and the lack of them. If you stand in front of a line and if you look at a product, and if a new product comes along every minute, then they all look different. How about the seams? Have they been sewed properly? How about the quality? Can this product be delivered, yes or no, to the customer? Then this is an activity which is extremely tiresome, but an activity which can easily be replaced by a machine and help us cut costs, because studies show us that out of 1 million tests, 300 to 800 errors were made, and a very well-trained AI system can do the job much better. So I'm fully on your page, you see. I think there will be different forms and dimensions, because it is up to us to decide whether added value can be created, because AI only makes sense if we can use it in order to create added value. Robert, when you speak about the V, Mrs. Schlinkert, I like that very much, because you are representing a factory. We is a bit too general and too unspecific. We does not mean the ones who are up here on stage, and we are not society by and large, which tries to set in place rules and regulations with the help of political institutions, but we are the ones who are here at the trade fair. We are the industrial institutions which contribute to technological changes. We are the ones who decide which path to embark upon. And maybe the answer is both scenarios will probably happen in one way or another in different levels of intensity. What does that really mean? Corporations develop technologies today with regards to process optimization. We know that in Germany, institutions are rather weak in developing new technologies in order to further develop their business models. We also know that companies in Germany put a very minor focus on a scenario where the employees get the best possible support and can acquire new skills, youth enhancement. This focus in the field of research and innovation does not really exist. Here we're lagging far behind by way of international comparison, but it would be interesting to look at the situation in other countries. But we are not the best in class in Germany either, and that is my concern in the course of these discussions. Once we leave this room and once we all agree agree on particular items, then, we diffuse this responsibility in the room. But those who are here, who are responsible for the development of new technologies, like you, Mrs. Schlinkert, and I think that you are fully aware of your responsibility because it forms part and parcel of your business model. You are responsible, and you are the ones that we've got to focus on, and you have to take on your responsibility. At the end of the day, this will not only be of benefit to society by and large, or the employees in general, but also for our long-term competitiveness, because we've got to create a German USP at the international level. And I think you pursue also the strategy that others do as well, because you focus on the human touch. You want to make sure that these technologies can be implemented in a responsible manner. That's a very interesting point. It's not really on my list. I'd like to take it up and ask you more about it. We've had a similar discussion with a different group of people yesterday, but what was very interesting yesterday was a point that I'd like to take up now. We talk a lot about the strength and the weaknesses of Germany. There are many prejudices still that have to be done away with. Some of these items might be right. Mrs. Petaker, we looked at the OECD figures, comparative figures, and I remember that you also mentioned very clearly that in the field of social partnerships at international level, we are very well positioned. But now I'd like to ask all of you if you would like to come in on that. Maybe you don't want to really say anything about it if you don't think about this topic, but what are our strengths and weaknesses at the global level in Germany concerning the questions that we have discussed? Well, I'd like to come in on that. I think Germany is very well positioned concerning AI as an industrial side at global scale, much better than the media very often presented. Of course, there's China, the US, these are AI superpowers. But Germany is very much integrated in the European market, which is very important. And it has a very important, unique selling point. What are the AI strengths in Germany? They are to be found in the field of research. With regards to the publications per capita in Germany, we are in position number 5 at global scale. When you look at the quality of the research activities, we are position number 4. For a country this size, that is quite considerable and very good. When you look at economic research, industrial research, we're also very well positioned. We are amongst the 4 best organizations the world over. So we're in rank number 4. I spoke about social partnerships, where Germany has a very strong USP. A book has recently been published, which is called Power and Progress by a etymologist who focused on these particular topics. He also looked at the situation in the US and he said, take a look at what's happening in Germany. Germany plays a role model in bringing about the transformation process successfully, because there's nothing that will happen automatically. Technological developments and innovation do not always have to lead to positive results, but you've got to work on that and give shape to that. That's a very important lever. But we have some catching up to do in Germany, and that relates to transfer. We've got very good research, but we need to transfer this knowledge and bring it into the companies. With regards to technology readiness level, we've got to move from level 1 to level 5. We've got to transfer this knowledge to the corporations. We need more companies which use AI and make it marketable. Mr. Schinkert, would you like to come in on that? Same holds true for the institutions. Here we have much more to do. Here Germany is in the middle field. We've got to do much more in the sectors and apply AI even further, especially in the field of energy and sustainability. We have a lot of catching up to do. But this also holds true for the health sector. AI has a lot of untapped potential. And also with regards to AI compute, Germany has a lot more to do. There's room for improvement concerning data capacity, but also computer capacities. Thank you so much. Now that is a little bit of extra spice that you added to the soup. Who would like to come in on that? Frank? Yes, there's one thing that occurs to me when you talk about responsibility in giving shape to using AI. 10% of the corporations are already using AI. This makes us believe that at a state like this, it's just like Industry 4.0 a couple of years ago. This is a big hype. But the users in the very beginning are only the big players, the big companies who can afford to use AI. But when we think about the structure, the size of our companies, we know that 90% of the companies in Germany are SMEs. And SMEs can't go out and buy a new set of AI technology of which they don't know how much it will cost, how much of extra services will be required. What do I have to do if the system needs to be modified? Here they're quite reluctant. The companies wait and see. They wait for the technology to be developed in such a way that they can change it, modify it themselves. And this is what is not yet available. That is still missing. Much more should be done on the part of the suppliers. At the automatic here, we talked about this recently. As a company, I'd like to say, well, I can develop my own AI system without having the black box not only in technology, but also by being able to keep the costs under control. I'd like to give the companies more leeway, more room for improvement. And if you can do that out of your own strength, you can also contribute more to social partnerships and take on responsibility. Mrs. Schlinkert, would you like to add to that? I think that's a very important point. Of course, I'm also thinking about the cost that AI incurs. And we've got to sort of meet somewhere in the middle. You can't buy AI simply off the shelf. It doesn't work that way. It needs to be tailored to your own processes. Yes, that's my expectation as well. These systems are not yet available, though. And this means that investments have to be made. And they cannot only be made by small startups. Therefore, it's after the essence that we ourselves become makers and create added value. Because I fully agree with what you've just said. This is a matter of concern to me. We are not good enough, you see. We are not good enough in rolling out our research results in practical terms and creating added value. Many very well-trained, skilled workers, those people who've got their PhDs in those sectors where we need them, go to Silicon Valley. They partly go to China or move elsewhere to other countries where things happen more rapidly, where things are being used in practical terms much more quickly. And this brings us back to us again. We have to do it better, not simply point the finger and delegate responsibility to others. No, it requires cooperation and collaboration. No, I didn't mean to say that we should point the finger, but this is what's just one part, one component of our overall joint responsibility. Thank you so much. We already spoke about the industrial side of Germany at the global level, an international comparison. Who would like to come in on that? If you don't want to comment on that, I would like to talk about another issue that Mrs. Paterka spoke about already. She shared her own experience with us in the field of education in Britain. But there is quite an obvious question that we have not yet discussed. We spoke about the repercussions that AI might have on the different levels of competences, but competence might also be one of the prerequisites for AI applications to be used and be shaped in a way. Against this backdrop, if we want to achieve that goal, because we always said we are the corporations, the organizations have to join in. We also have to give shape to the future. What do they need? Could you please be as specific as you can? Or is it that you don't need? I also do some research, and I also focus on the things that we do not need any longer. Everything that can be found by running a Google web search, is that something I've got to teach, yes or no? If that's what we want, if we want to have a user-friendly development and implementation of AI systems, if that's what we want, what are the required competences? What are the skills that are needed? Or what can be done away with? Let's start off with Mrs. Paterka. I think there are different competences which become ever more important, such as critical thinking. You want to form an opinion. Problem solving is another important topic. But human skills are equally important. Personal interaction. How can you work together with somebody in a team? How can you work with many other persons? These are the topics which acquire ever more significance. And we also know from surveys that companies are also of the opinion that these are skills that become more and more important. Same holds true for AI. But that is what people actually look out for. I also think that there are skills that are no longer required. In the past, we had ICT classes where you learned how to develop a PowerPoint presentation or how to produce an Excel spreadsheet. In this sense, I think it would really make sense to teach coding, what has been the case in Britain already since 2014. From the next semester onwards, we will teach coding. And my colleague said, I can't even open up a Word document. How am I supposed to lecture coding? But, it's kind of meddling through. That's the attitude that prevails in the UK. And I think this would be the right attitude. I remember an event that happened 10 years ago. We had a discussion on educational further training. We listened to one of the most important persons responsible for education in one of the big German companies, and they said, we don't need any practical experience, but we need people who look at the results that are available from a critical stance. No practical experience any longer. Which qualifications and competences do we need, Frank Lennings? Back to what we need. I just talked about our common past 30 years ago when we spoke about human-centric strategies, participation strategies in the project. Participation needs to be rolled out and be made possible. Back then, participation qualification was considered to be the enablement of those who participated in the process to express themselves and make their voices heard. I think this is still a very important topic. But it is also a topic that an organization needs to be equipped with when the managers have to have the competence of promoting such participation. Participation is of the essence. Participation is the buzzword. We need to create the conditions for participation and let it happen. There are certain things that you don't know about, that you cannot know, but that you need. This is a necessary competence that we need to be open-minded for, and this is something which is also being promoted in the field of research projects. New work or AI needs to be introduced. Yes, new work is a very important topic for economic associations. What does new work mean for managers? In line with the qualification for more participation, that's a very interesting combination, very important point. Mr. Schlinkert, from your particular point of view, what kind of competences do we need in order to introduce AI in the proper manner, and what do we not need? One competence which has not yet mentioned, I think we've got a wonderful list of qualifications, but what we need also is error culture. We're agile. And there are always things that break. Something breaks every day. What exactly is the reason for that? What are the root causes? So we look at the things that break and try to rectify. But as a team, why don't we come up with a positive attitude towards things that break and fall apart? This is a completely new area. And I think we should give a positive turn to that, come up with an error culture, take everybody on board, and recognize that some things should be forgotten, although we've learned them because they were not good enough. Robert, thank you very much. You will be given the possibility to say more in a minute. Two more aspects should be added to the list, I guess. And it sounds rather simple, but we all have to learn to speak English. We spoke to various different sectors, wind manufacturers, I spoke to craftsmen, I spoke to a big industrial company in mechanical engineering, and they all told me the same. And this is what many others told us as well. We need qualified, skilled workers to get the competence that we need. These are very ambitious goals that the national government has set for itself, but the corporations that we speak to tell us, well, these goals can by no means be accomplished if we don't teach English in vocational training. English needs to become the language in the labor market in general, and that's a big problem in Germany. It's in our way. And it will prevent the qualifications from coming just like we need. I'm not going to tell you which qualifications we need, but it sounds rather simple, but that's what we've got to discuss. We need to speak English at the shop floor, and we need to discuss ways and means of being able to reach that goal. What will the story be like in 10 years from now? Can you describe two different scenarios? One scenario which might tell you that the things that we have discussed this morning have worked out really well, and describe another scenario where things have really failed. Robert, would you like to start off?
Well, if you had asked me last, I would like to lead over to my presentation, but if it went well, what we talked about today, then in industrial companies on the shop floor and in white-collar work, we will see people who use technical systems to just simply get the job done, but also use it when they see the possibility and have the creativity and the interest to look beyond their own activity and assume other tasks with their domain knowledge in order to strengthen innovative capacity of the company, bring in new product ideas, even if maybe they only observe machine parameter. That's if it goes well. And if it doesn't go so well, then we have a situation where humans are the prolonged arm of the system, does just the work that cannot be done by robots, like sorting bulk goods or get something out of big tanks, where small companies can't get a robot on board. That's, of course, a very negative perspective, but you asked for the two poles. Yes, we wanted to exaggerate a bit. Well, if it went really well, then in 10 years' time, we have a new name for Made in Germany and Made in Europe, and those would be algorithms that make various sectors worldwide more efficient, and they would then come from Germany and Europe and would be operated all over the world. That would be the positive scenario. From my point, if we can't do that, then we'd be a part supplier. Then we would become the manufacturing company for various components for others in the then leading world markets. Frank Lennings. Well, if it goes well, in 10 years' time, we have competitive companies and organizations, globally competitive, that can hire people for the workplaces, who have satisfied workers, who have some room for maneuver when it comes to designing their own jobs and workplaces and their individual situations. If it goes bad, then we have intransparent situations where people are no longer needed in the companies. Maybe they can close automation gaps. I personally, I'm confident that there's a lot more to say for the positive option. Maybe not purely, but it goes there. So, final comment, Ms. Peterka. Well then, Robert, I will try to hand over to you, because the scenarios that you will present, we developed together in the Observatory for AI with the ISC, and what I would like to see is the most desirable one, the transformation scenario, empowered employees who use AI and apply their competencies. Companies that use AI in the broad sense, where there is a digital management culture, and politicians that nurture AI where it's necessary. The negative example would be the contrary thing. People just don't know what's happening. Companies would not use AI and do not apply it everywhere. The really powerful AI systems, because those you can only develop together with employees, and politicians would be lagging behind. Right, this is a moment for a round of applause for our panelists. We have already prepared to hand over to our next item on the agenda the scenarios that can be developed for the future. Robert Peters is going to introduce them. We have a short changeover